Why do you keep giving up on yourself? Or maybe you never actually learned how not to.
It is, it's a quiet, incredibly painful question, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, it's the kind of question that usually only finds us in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Or right after you've abandoned a goal you swore you were going to stick to this time.
Exactly. And that's what we are going to look at very closely today in this deep dive. We're going to hold that question up to the light.
But gently. I think that's important to establish right away.
Yes, very gently. Our mission today is not to make you feel like a subject in a lab or, to give you some rigid, tough love lecture about discipline.
Right. There's enough of that out there already.
There really is. So instead, our mission is to gently unpack this painful cycle of self-doubt. We want to find a kinder, much more sustainable way forward.
And to do that, we have pulled from some truly profound sources. We're looking at David Chan's work on the psychology of self-handicapping, Carol Dweck's foundational studies on mindset.
Oh, that Dweck research is just eye-opening.
It really is. We also have some massive neurobiological updates to the theory of learned helplessness from researchers like Stephen Mayer, and some really practical clinical insights from Harvard Health.
It's a rich collection of material. And looking through all of it, the common thread is just, it's so deeply human.
It is. The human mind is incredibly complex, but above all else, it is deeply protective.
Protective.
Right. When we start to look at why we do the things we do, especially the things that seem to hurt our own progress, we really have to start from a place of profound grace.
I love that. Profound grace.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no rush today. We are going to take this slowly.
I think we all know the cycle. If you are listening to this, you can probably feel it in your chest just thinking about it.
Oh, absolutely. You start something new. It could be, a fitness goal, a new habit, maybe a creative project you've been dreaming about.
Or even a new approach to a struggling relationship.
Right. And in that beginning, there is this immense, beautiful hope. You buy the new notebook or the new running shoes. You tell yourself, this time is going to be different. I am going to be different.
You feel that momentum.
You do. You really feel it. But then, inevitably, the momentum starts to fade. Life gets busy, or you hit a roadblock, or you just wake up one morning and the energy it's mysteriously gone.
And the internal narrative begins to shift.
Yeah. Eventually, you break the promise you made to yourself.
Yeah.
You stop working out, or you put the manuscript in a drawer. You snap at the person you swore you'd be patient with.
And then that quiet disappointment settles in. You realize you're right back where you started.
It feels like a betrayal, doesn't it? Like you are betraying your own hopes.
It does. And what hurts the most isn't just the unfinished project or the broken habit. It's the story you tell yourself afterward.
Oh, man. That heavy, familiar voice that says, see, I knew you couldn't do it.
Exactly. When we examine the research on overcoming self-sabotage, we see that this behavior manifests in so many different ways.
Like how?
Well, sometimes it's very loud and destructive, right? Like abusing substances or intentionally burning a bridge in a relationship. But often it is incredibly subtle.
Subtle, like just mundane, everyday things.
Right. It looks mundane. It's chronically procrastinating on a task that actually matters to your career, or mysteriously forgetting a deadline.
Or starting a dozen brilliant projects and leaving every single one of them 90% finished. I know I've been there.
Many of us have. Or even overeating in the evening just to deal with the free-floating anxiety of a stressful day.
Right. And the action itself is really just the surface, isn't it? The real damage happens in that aftermath we were just talking about.
Yes, the psychological toll. Repeated failures to follow through create this incredibly heavy burden of guilt.
You feel frustrated with yourself.
You look around and wonder why everyone else seems to be able to just function, to just do the thing while you feel stuck in the mud.
And over time, that frustration morphs into deep shame. And there is a critical psychological distinction between the two.
Between guilt and shame. Right. Guilt says, I did something bad, or I failed at a task. But shame says, I am bad. I am a failure.
Wow. That's a heavy distinction.
It is. Shame reinforces a profound sense of worthlessness. It makes you feel like you lack drive or commitment, or that you're just fundamentally, irreparably flawed.
And that deep shame, that feeling of being fundamentally flawed, it's so painful that the brain will do absolutely anything to avoid confirming it.
Anything.
Which actually brings up a really fascinating concept I was reading in our notes from David Chan's research. He studies a phenomenon called self-handicapping.
Ah, yes. Self-handicapping.
When I first read about it, I literally had to put the notes down because it described my own past behavior so perfectly. It was almost uncomfortable.
It's one of the core engines of self-sabotage. It's the phenomenon where people deliberately and often subconsciously hurt their own chances of success.
So they're actively working against themselves.
Essentially, yes, they throw obstacles in their own path to ensure they don't perform at their best.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Is it like hitting the brakes right before a crash just so you can control the narrative? You get to say you caused the stop, rather than admitting you didn't actually know how to drive the car.
That is a brilliant analogy, yes. We blame external factors to protect something very precious and very fragile, our self-esteem.
Okay, give me an example. What does this look like in real life?
Consider a student who has a massive, defining final exam the next morning. Instead of studying, they stay up until 4 in the morning playing video games.
Right.
Or a professional who goes out drinking the night before the biggest pitch presentation of their career.
Which sounds crazy.
Yeah.
On the surface, it looks like reckless self-destruction.
It does look reckless, but psychologically, it is highly calculated. When they inevitably do poorly on the exam or the pitch, what is the narrative they get to use?
Oh, I see. They get to say, well, I only failed because I was exhausted, or I only bombed that presentation because I was hungover.
Exactly. They give themselves a scapegoat. Because what they are desperately avoiding is the alternative scenario.
This scenario where they actually try.
Right. Imagine if that student had studied all night. Imagine if they had rested, eaten a good breakfast, given the exam 100% of their true effort, and still failed.
Oh, man. That would be crushing.
It would be. If that happened, they would have to face the devastating thought that they might just lack the ability. They might not be smart enough. They might not be good enough.
So self-handicapping is a preemptive strike.
Yes. It's a preemptive strike to protect the ego from that exact realization. The subconscious logic is, it is better to be seen as lazy or disorganized than to be seen as inadequate.
That completely reframes things for me. To realize that staying up late watching television when I should be preparing for a meeting the next day isn't just me being lazy or having poor time management.
No, it's not.
It is me being terrified. So if self-sabotage is actually a protective mechanism, a way to shield our ego from devastation, then giving up isn't a sign of weakness at all.
Not at all.
It's a sign of a misaligned defense mechanism. Your brain is just trying to keep you safe from emotional pain.
It is entirely about survival. Your mind is trying to survive an environment that it perceives as a threat to its identity.
Survival. That leads us to some of the most profound neurobiological research we have in our stack today.
Yes, the science of helplessness.
Right. When we talk about giving up, we have to talk about the foundational work done back in the late 1960s by a psychologist named Martin Seligman. He coined the term learned helplessness.
This is a crucial piece of the puzzle.
This is the famous research with the dogs, right?
Yeah.
I know it's a bit of a sad experiment to talk about, but the findings shaped psychology for half a century.
It is difficult to think about, yes, but the mechanics of the experiment are vital to understanding our own brains. In those early experiments, dogs were placed in enclosures where they received mild but unpredictable electric shocks.
Okay.
For one group of dogs, there was a panel they could press to stop the shock. They had control.
Right, they could do something about it.
Exactly. But for another group, there was absolutely nothing they could do to stop it. No panel, no escape route. They just had to endure it.
That's awful. So what happened next?
Later, Seligman took all the dogs and put them in a new enclosure. This time, all they had to do to escape the shock was jump over a very small barrier.
A completely solvable problem.
Yes. The dogs who previously had control figured it out immediately and jumped over. But the dogs who'd been in the inescapable situation, they didn't even try.
They just gave up.
They just lay down on the floor and passively accepted the pain, even though the escape was right there in front of them.
Wow. And Seligman theorized that during the first part of the experiment, those dogs had learned that they were helpless.
Correct. They learned that their actions had no effect on their environment, so they simply internalized that lesson and gave up trying, even when the environment changed.
And for decades, that was the accepted theory in psychology, that helplessness is something we acquire. We experience failure, we learn that we have no power, and so we stop trying.
It became the standard explanation for so much of human behavior.
Right, like it explained why people in abusive relationships struggle to leave, or why a student who repeatedly fails math just stops turning in their homework.
It made perfect logical sense.
But wait, I need to pause you there, because I was reading the newer neurobiological research from Stephen Mayer, who actually worked with Seligman on those original studies. And modern neuroscience completely flipped this theory upside down.
It did. It's a fascinating paradigm shift.
If helplessness isn't something we learn, How did the field of psychology get it wrong for 50 years? What changed?
What changed was the technology we used to look inside the brain. In the 1960s, psychologists could only observe outward behavior. They saw an animal stop trying, and they deduced a cognitive process. I learned to be helpless.
They were just guessing the internal mechanism based on the external action.
Precisely. But fast forward to the modern era, Stephen Mayer returned to this exact phenomenon using modern functional magnetic resonance imaging fMRI machines and advanced neurochemistry.
He wanted to map the specific neural pathways involved in giving up.
Yes. And what he discovered shocked the scientific community. The original theory had it backward. We do not learn to be helpless.
It's completely changed how I look at my own past failures.
Helplessness is the brain's biological baseline. It is the unconditioned default state of the mammalian brain when faced with prolonged, unmanageable stress.
Wait, really? The default state?
The default state. Mayer found that when you are overwhelmed, a very primitive part of your brainstem called the dorsal raphe nucleus kicks into high gear.
The dorsal raphe nucleus.
Yeah, and it releases a massive flood of serotonin into your system. Now, we usually think of serotonin as the happy chemical, but in the specific context in the brainstem, that serotonin acts as an inhibitor.
An inhibitor meaning it shuts things down.
Exactly. It shuts down your active voluntary responses. It physically induces passivity. It's an ancient evolutionary survival reflex designed to conserve energy when an organism believes it is trapped by a predator or a harsh environment.
So the passivity, the collapsing on the couch, the complete loss of motivation that is hardwired into us from the start.
It is the factory setting for prolonged stress. What is actually learned, what we have to acquire, is control.
We have to learn control. How does that work?
When we realize we can affect our environment, a completely different, much more evolved part of the brain activates the medial prefrontal cortex. This is the area responsible for executive function, planning, and willpower.
The conscious part of our brain.
Right. When the prefrontal cortex detects that you have agency, it sends powerful inhibitory signals down to the dorsal raphe nucleus in the brainstem. It essentially tells the primitive brain, hold on, turn off the serotonin flood. We don't need to shut down. We can do something about this.
But the prefrontal cortex requires a massive amount of metabolic energy to run, doesn't it?
A tremendous amount. And under severe, prolonged stress, like chronic financial worry, a toxic work environment, or honestly, the emotional exhaustion of constantly criticizing yourself, that prefrontal cortex gets fatigued.
It just runs out of fuel.
It runs out of fuel. And when the prefrontal cortex goes offline, the brain simply reverts to its default setting. The brainstem takes over, the serotonin floods in, and you give up.
I want to really let that sink in for a moment.
Yeah.
Because what this means for you, listening to this right now, is staggering.
It is a profound realization.
When you give up, when you feel so overwhelmed by a strict diet or a demanding budget or a massive life change that you just collapse and abandon the effort entirely, that is not a character flaw.
No, it isn't.
It is not because you are fundamentally broken or lazy or weak. It is your brain reverting to its default biological state to survive emotional burnout. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of you that exerts willpower and control, is just out of energy.
And your brain does what it was biologically programmed to do millions of years ago. When it feels trapped, it shuts down to save you.
It is a profound relief to understand the mechanism, isn't it? It removes the heavy moral judgment we attach to our struggles.
That's the most important takeaway here. You are not a bad person for giving up. You are an exhausted human being whose neurobiology is functioning exactly as it evolved to function.
So the task moving forward isn't to punish yourself for feeling helpless.
Not at all. The task is to slowly, gently teach the prefrontal cortex that it has control again.
Which brings up a massive point of cultural friction. Because everything we are talking about right now, grace, understanding neurobiology, dropping the moral judgment, goes directly against the cultural grain.
Very much so.
We live in a society that aggressively glorifies the grind. You open any social media app, and you are bombarded with messages like, no days off, sleep when you're dead, or push through the pain.
It's a very pervasive narrative.
We have this deeply ingrained belief that if we aren't suffering, we aren't making progress. So if I accept that my giving up is just biology, and I stop punishing myself for slipping up, won't I just sit on the couch forever? I mean, if I don't use a harsh hand, how will I ever get anything done?
That is the ultimate fear, isn't it? It's the fear that if I drop the whip, the horse will just stop running and die in the field.
Exactly. That's exactly how it feels.
But we confuse rigid control and self-punishment with actual strength. Our sources, particularly the clinical psychology notes on behavioral change, clarify this vital distinction. Discipline and self-punishment are not the same thing.
They aren't.
No. In fact, they operate on completely different emotional and neurological frequencies.
How do you differentiate the two when they often look exactly the same from the outside?
It comes down to the internal motivation. Discipline is rooted in care. Self-punishment is driven by shame.
Care versus shame. Okay, let's explore that.
Let me explain the mechanics of that. Real discipline is the practice of showing up for your future self because you genuinely value that person. You want good things for your future self.
Like putting money in a savings account.
Exactly. You keep commitments even when it is hard, yes, but you also adjust when circumstances change. There is flexibility built into the structure because the overarching goal is sustainable growth. You are trying to build a life that you don't have to constantly numb yourself to escape from.
And self-punishment. How does that operate internally?
Self-punishment disguises itself as discipline. It wears the exact same clothes. It sets the alarm for 5:00 a.m. It tracks every calorie. It schedules back-to-back meetings. But the energy underneath is anger.
Anger at yourself.
Yes. The goal isn't to nurture your future self. The goal is to eradicate the perceived badness of your current self. It's driven by the belief that your basic humanity, your need for rest, your mistakes are all evidence of your unworthiness. The internal dialogue is cruel.
Wow. So discipline might say, I know you're exhausted from a long day, but let's go for a gentle 10-minute walk because I know it will clear your head and you'll feel better afterward.
That's a great example of discipline.
While self-punishment says, you lazy piece of garbage, you missed your workout yesterday, so today you have to run 5 miles until you feel sick and you don't deserve dinner.
Exactly. One approach problem solves, the other attacks. True discipline stretches you, but it refuses to break you. It includes deliberate, unapologetic rest because it understands that biological recovery is required for the prefrontal cortex to function.
So rest isn't a reward for being good, it's fuel.
Yes. When taking a break brings you crushing guilt, that is a massive red flag. That signals you are operating in punishment mode, not discipline mode. You cannot punish yourself into lasting change. You can only care for yourself into it.
So how does a person get trapped in that punishment loop to begin with? I mean, if we are using self-punishment to mask our fear of inadequacy, what are the specific psychological beliefs that keep us locked in this cycle of starting, panicking, and giving up?
To understand the root of that trap, we have to look at the foundational beliefs we hold about our own nature. And this brings us to the pioneering work of Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck.
Her research on mindsets.
Yes, her research on mindsets is absolutely critical here. She identifies 2 basic frameworks that shape how we view ourselves and the world: the fixed mindset and the growth mindset.
I know these terms get thrown around a lot in corporate seminars or, school posters, usually just as a synonym for try hard and stay positive. But the actual psychological mechanics behind Dweck's work are so much deeper than that, aren't they?
Much, much deeper. Let's look at the mechanics of the fixed mindset first. A person operating in a fixed mindset assumes that their character, their intelligence, and their creative abilities are static givens.
Like they're just carved in stone at birth.
Exactly. You are either naturally smart or you aren't. You're either a natural athlete or you aren't. You are either good at relationships or you are destined to be alone.
And if you believe that your traits are a fixed commodity, then every single thing you do becomes a high-stakes performance to prove you have those traits.
That is the burden of the fixed mindset. Every effort is an urgent test of your worth. If you believe you only have a certain unchangeable amount of intelligence, you have to spend your entire life proving you have a healthy dose of it.
It sounds exhausting.
It's incredibly exhausting. In this mindset, every situation is evaluated with a terrifying binary lens. Will I succeed or fail? Will I look smart or dumb? Will I be accepted or rejected?
So in a fixed mindset, what does failure actually mean to the brain?
In a fixed mindset, failure is an identity label. It is a permanent stamp of inadequacy. It doesn't mean I failed at the specific task because I used the wrong strategy. It means I am a failure.
So the action becomes a person.
Exactly. Imperfections are not areas for growth. They are deeply shameful secrets. And because of this, people with a fixed mindset will actively avoid challenges. They will stay firmly in their comfort zone where they can guarantee they look smart and capable.
The logic is simple, right? If you don't try, you can't fail.
And if you don't fail, you don't have to face the terrifying thought that you are deficient.
I was reading the methodology of one of the studies mentioned in our sources, the one Dweck conducted at the Columbia Brainwave Lab. And it is fascinating. Can we walk through what actually happened in that lab? Because it perfectly illustrates how deep this avoidance goes on a neurological level.
Oh, the Columbia study is remarkable because it shows the physical manifestation of this mindset. Dweck and her team brought participants into the lab and fitted them with EEG caps to monitor their brainwaves in real time.
Okay, so they're literally reading their brain activity.
Yes. They had the participants answer a series of very difficult trivia questions. After each question, the participants were told whether they got the answer right or wrong. Then, a few seconds later, they were given the correct answer.
Okay, so a classic test and feedback loop. What were the EEG caps looking for?
They were looking for specific electrical activity that indicates the brain is processing information and learning. What they found was staggering. When people with a fixed mindset were told they got a question wrong, their brains showed a massive spike of activity.
So they really cared that they got it wrong.
They were highly attuned to the failure itself. But when the researchers subsequently presented the correct answer, the information that could actually help them learn and improve for next time, the EEG readings for the fixed mindset participants basically flatlined.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
They literally tuned out the correct answer.
They didn't process the helpful feedback at all. They showed absolutely no brainwave interest in hearing the correct answer.
That's wild. Why?
Because the moment they were told they were wrong, they filed that entire experience into the failure category. The emotional pain of being wrong was so acute, so threatening to their ego, that they shut down their cognitive capacity to learn from it.
They just closed the door on it entirely.
Right. Being wrong meant they were fundamentally flawed, so their brain's defense mechanism was to disengage entirely to stop the bleeding.
That connects so perfectly to what we were talking about earlier with learned helplessness and the serotonin flood in the brainstem. The brain shuts down to avoid the pain.
Yes, the physiological shutdown mirrors the cognitive shutdown.
So if someone is trapped in a fixed mindset, the moment a new diet gets hard or a creative project hits a snag, they don't see it as a puzzle to solve. They see it as a revelation of their own inadequacy.
And the threat response kicks in.
So of course they give up. Giving up is safer than continuing to try and proving conclusively that you aren't good enough.
It is the ultimate form of self-sabotage. You are cutting off your own growth to protect your current ego. And this ties directly into another major psychological framework in our research, Albert Bandura's theory of self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy. We need to define this carefully because I think people confuse it with self-esteem constantly, and they are very different things.
They're distinct concepts. Self-esteem is your general sense of self-worth. It is how much you value yourself as a human being overall.
Like just feeling like you're a good person.
Right. Self-efficacy, on the other hand, is your belief in your specific capacity to execute actions and reach specific goals. It is your confidence in your own skills in a given domain.
The notes used a great analogy for this to separate the two, the rock climbing example.
Yes, that's a perfect way to visualize it. You can be a terrible rock climber. You know you are terrible. You have absolutely zero confidence in your ability to scale a rock wall. So your self-efficacy for rock climbing is incredibly low.
Mine is definitely zero.
But if you don't base your personal identity or your self-worth on being an athlete, your overall self-esteem remains perfectly intact. You can confidently say, I am a wonderful, valuable person, and I cannot climb a rock to save my life.
Right. It doesn't threaten your core identity. But what happens when low self-efficacy meets a domain that we do deeply care about, like our career trajectory or our physical health or our ability to be a loving partner?
That is where the friction happens.
Yeah.
When self-efficacy is low in an area that matters deeply to us, the brain views difficult tasks in that area not as challenges, but as profound personal threats.
Because it's attached to our self-worth now.
Yes. Because you lack the belief that you can succeed, your mind constantly scans the horizon for evidence that you are going to fail. You experience higher levels of stress, erratic task planning, and a profound lack of motivation.
Why put in the agonizing effort if you are already convinced of an impending shortfall?
Exactly. It becomes incredibly easy to give up because your mind has already written the tragic ending of the story.
I was reading through the Rebuilding Self-Trust notes, and there was a case study in there about a woman named Maya that really struck me because she did exactly what you just described. She lived out the tragedy of the fixed mindset and low self-efficacy.
Maya's story is a beautiful, if initially painful, illustration of this entire cycle.
I think it would help to ground all this heavy neuroscience in her story.
Absolutely. Maya was someone who poured her absolute heart and soul into a creative business venture. This wasn't just a casual hobby. She aligned it with her deepest values. She put her financial and emotional resources on the line, and she took a massive risk.
And despite all her passionate effort, her late nights, her dedication, it failed. The business model didn't work out, and she had to close it down.
Which is a natural part of taking risks in business or art. Most first ventures fail.
Right. But the critical part is what happened inside Maya's head afterward.
Exactly. Maya didn't just experience the failure of the business, she internalized the failure. Her fixed mindset kicked into overdrive. The failure of the business became a failure of her identity.
She made it about her.
She did. She started to aggressively doubt her own judgment. Her internal monologue became a loop of, how could I have been so foolish? How could I let this happen? I clearly don't have what it takes. I am just not cut out for this.
The narrative shifted completely from the business failed because of market conditions or strategy to I am a failure at my core.
And because of that profound shift in identity, the subtle self-sabotage began to creep into every other area of her life.
It leaked out into everything else.
It did. She started second-guessing every minor decision she had to make, even outside of work. She began actively avoiding new opportunities, even social or creative ones that genuinely excited her, because the fear of repeating the pain of failure was too great. She felt entirely disconnected from her own intuition and her own voice.
This is the true tragedy of the cycle we are talking about today. Maya didn't just lose a business venture. She lost her relationship with herself. She lost self-trust.
And without self-trust, you feel like you are walking on shifting sand. You feel fundamentally unreliable to your own mind.
Self-trust is defined in our clinical research as the ability to act in alignment with your values, to treat yourself with basic kindness during hardship, and to keep the promises you make to yourself.
It's the foundation of resilience.
When you fail at something and you respond by aggressively attacking yourself, you break that foundational trust. You teach your brain that you are not a safe person to make mistakes around.
You teach your brain that you are not a safe person to make mistakes around. That is a vital realization.
If I know that the moment I slip up on my new diet, my internal monologue is going to verbally abuse me and call me worthless for 3 days straight, why on earth would I ever try a diet again?
You wouldn't. The emotional risk is simply too high.
It is safer to just eat the junk food and stay on the couch, because at least then I'm not exposing myself to the trauma of trying and being punished by my own mind.
Precisely. You withdraw your effort to protect yourself from your own inner critic. But as the source material beautifully points out, failure doesn't mean you are broken. It just means you are brave enough to try something whose outcome was uncertain.
So how do you rebuild a house when the foundations turn to sand? How did Maya get out of this dark place? And how can someone listening start to rebuild that trust?
Maya had to undergo a massive inner shift. She couldn't just try harder. She had to entirely change the tone and texture of her internal monologue.
Where does that begin?
It began with cultivating a psychological skill that most of us are unfortunately never taught: self-compassion.
Let's talk about the clinical research from Harvard Health on this.
Right.
Because I think there is a huge, stubborn misconception in our culture that self-compassion is just, well, being soft, or letting yourself off the hook, or wallowing in self-pity.
It is so often misunderstood as self-indulgence. But the clinical data shows it is the exact opposite. Self-compassion is simply the practice of offering yourself the same warm, supportive, objective understanding that you would naturally extend to a good friend who was suffering or who had made a mistake.
Like treating yourself the way you treat people you actually like.
Exactly. If your best friend's business failed, you wouldn't call them a worthless idiot. You would sit with them, acknowledge how much it hurts, and help them see their inherent value outside of the business. Self-compassion is turning that exact same mechanism inward.
And the Harvard research stresses that this is not just a personality trait that you are either magically born with or without. It is a highly learnable physiological skill.
It is highly learnable, and the physiological benefits are tangible and measurable. The Harvard research shows that strong self-compassion sets the stage for better physical health, more resilient relationships, and significantly lower levels of anxiety and depression.
It actually changes the body?
We can actually look at the neurochemistry of it. When you attack yourself with a harsh inner critic, your body's threat defense system activates. Your amygdala perceives a threat, and your system floods with cortisol and adrenaline. You are literally causing yourself physical stress.
But what happens when you practice self-compassion?
When you practice self-compassion, you activate the mammalian caregiving system. It lowers cortisol and releases oxytocin and endorphins. It physically calms the nervous system down.
It stops the internal attacks so the prefrontal cortex can actually come back online and learn from the mistake.
Exactly. When people with high self-compassion suffer a setback, they recognize the suffering without judgment, and they are kind to themselves in that specific moment. They don't compound the natural pain of the failure with the unnatural pain of self-abuse. They create a safe internal environment where it is okay to look at the mistake objectively.
Which naturally paves the way for moving out of the fixed mindset and into the growth mindset.
They are deeply connected. We return to Carol Dweck's research here. If a fixed mindset believes traits are carved in stone, a growth mindset is based on the belief that your basic qualities are your intelligence, your emotional regulation, your skills can be cultivated through effort, strategic adjustment, and help from others.
The hand you are dealt at birth is just the starting point of the game, not the final score.
Yes. People with a growth mindset don't suffer from the delusion that anyone can become Albert Einstein just by trying really hard, but they believe that a person's true, ultimate potential is unknown and unknowable until they apply years of passion, toil, and training.
It's like you have to fire the screaming drill sergeant in your head, the one who yells at you every time you drop a ball, the one who demands perfection on the first try.
You fire him and you hire a patient, supportive coach instead.
Exactly. A coach who watches the game tape with you and says, okay, that play didn't work. What did we learn and how do we adjust our footing for the next play?
That is a perfect analogy. The hallmark of the growth mindset is a passion for learning rather than a desperate hunger for approval. In a fixed mindset, your internal monologue is a constant, paranoid judge, evaluating every single piece of information to decide if you are a winner or a loser.
But in a growth mindset, that internal monologue changes its function entirely.
It is no longer judging, it is analyzing. It becomes a voracious appetite for constructive action.
Because failure is no longer an indictment of your soul, it's just data.
It's just input. It is motivating, informative input. It tells you what didn't work so you can adjust your strategy. You see setbacks as a wake-up call, not a life sentence.
And this shift profoundly impacts not just how we achieve personal goals, but how we connect with other human beings.
Dweck's research shows that people with fixed mindsets expect relationships to be instantly perfect and perpetual, like a fairy tale. When conflict inevitably arises, they assign blame to a deep character flaw in their partner, which leads rapidly to contempt.
Because if traits are fixed, the flaw can't be fixed. It means the relationship is doomed.
Right. But a growth mindset in a relationship means you can acknowledge imperfections in your partner without assigning fatal blame. You see conflicts as problems of communication that can be developed and refined, not as permanent personality defects. You become vitally interested in each other's development over time.
That is beautiful, and applies perfectly to the relationship we have with ourselves, becoming vitally interested in our own development, rather than obsessed with our own perfection.
Yes.
Okay, so we understand the neuroscience of helplessness, we understand the need to replace self-punishment with self-compassion, and to cultivate a growth mindset. But how do we actually do this?
It's a practical application.
Right. If someone is listening right now and they feel completely stuck, how do they start making this shift today without triggering that dorsal Groferi nucleus to flood them with serotonin and shut them down again?
This is where we have to deeply respect the neurobiology of habit formation. We cannot just decide to be completely different people overnight. The source material on the science of habit formation explains exactly why we must start incredibly small.
It comes back to the battle between the prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia, doesn't it?
It does. Willpower, as we discussed, is the ability to resist short-term temptations in order to meet long-term goals. It is driven by the prefrontal cortex. But willpower requires immense metabolic energy. It is a highly finite resource.
It runs out.
It gets depleted by stress, by decision fatigue, and by physical exhaustion. When you try to overhaul your entire life at once, saying, starting tomorrow, I'm waking up at 5 a.m., working out for an hour, eating only raw vegetables, and writing a novel, you drain your prefrontal cortex in a matter of days.
And when the prefrontal cortex is completely drained, we fall back to the older, more automatic parts of the brain, the basal ganglia.
Exactly. The basal ganglia is the part of the brain that executes automatic routines, habits. It requires very little energy to run. The goal of any lasting behavior change isn't to rely on willpower forever.
The goal is to move the desired behavior from the conscious, effortful prefrontal cortex into the automatic, effortless basal ganglia.
And to do that, you have to create a neurological habit loop, a cue, a routine, and a reward.
I have to admit, my basal ganglia is currently hardwired to expect a cookie every single time I open a blank document. It's an incredibly strong habit loop.
We all have those.
How does the brain actually wire these things in? It has to do with dopamine, right?
It does, and dopamine is widely misunderstood. We often think of it just as the pleasure chemical, but in the context of habit formation, dopamine is primarily a learning signal.
A learning signal.
When you perform an action and receive a reward, like the sugar from your cookie dopamine is released in the brain, this release physically strengthens the synaptic connections between the neurons involved in that action. It tells the brain, remember exactly what we just did in the context we were in because that felt good and we need to do it again.
So it paves the neural pathway.
Exactly. But here is the trap. If you set massive, exhausting goals for yourself, you rarely get to experience the dopamine reward because you rarely succeed in hitting the goal. You are constantly in a state of deficit.
But if you set tiny, easily achievable goals, you get a constant drip of dopamine every time you complete one.
Yes. That dopamine physically wires the new habit into the basal ganglia, making it more automatic each day.
So we have to start incredibly small to hack the dopamine system. Our sources outline a very gentle, realistic path for rebuilding self-trust using these principles. The first phase from the Rebuilding Self-Trust material is about acknowledging the pain without judgment.
This is a crucial first step.
Let's explore that, because usually my first instinct when I fail is to either numb the pain or aggressively judge myself for it.
It is human nature to want to flee from pain. But failure hurts. Losing momentum on a goal you cared about hurts. The first step is simply let yourself feel that sting without rushing to fix it with toxic positivity or numb it with distraction.
Just sitting with it.
Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They wait in the basement of your subconscious and lift weights. They get stronger. Let yourself grieve the fact that things didn't go the way you wanted.
But without the shame.
That is the crucial part. Do it without attaching a narrative of shame to it. Just witness your own disappointment with kindness. Say to yourself, I'm really sad this didn't work out, not, I am sad because I am a failure.
Just separating the event from the identity.
Mm-hmm.
And the clinical research from Harvard suggests we follow that up by comforting the body. This is such a radical idea to me.
It shouldn't be, but it is.
When we feel bad about failing, we usually deny ourselves basic care as a form of punishment. We skip meals, we restrict our sleep, we push ourselves harder.
We treat our bodies as if they are the enemy that caused the failure. We must intentionally reverse that. Comforting the body means doing something incredibly simple and grounding to activate that parasympathetic nervous system we talked about earlier.
So practically speaking, what does that look like?
Eat something healthy and nourishing, not as a reward, but as baseline maintenance. Lie down and rest for 10 minutes without looking at a screen. Practice just a few minutes of deep breathing to lower your heart rate.
The Harvard notes even recommend a specific writing exercise for this, don't they?
They do. They recommend writing a short letter to yourself describing a situation that caused you pain or a recent failure. But the rule is you must write it entirely without blaming anyone, including yourself.
Wow, that sounds challenging.
It is at first. Use the letter to simply nurture your feelings the exact way you would say to the friend who is hurting. Give your body and your mind a dose of physical and emotional compassion to counteract the stress response. Rest isn't a reward for perfect behavior. It is a biological requirement for resilience.
I love that. Rest is a biological requirement. Once we've calmed the nervous system, how do we start setting goals again without falling into the trap of setting them so big that we panic? The notes mentioned focusing on visceral values.
Often we give up because our goals are vague, societal expectations that are completely disconnected from what actually brings us joy. We rely on extrinsic motivation rather than intrinsic motivation.
Like saying, I want to get in shape.
Yeah.
Just because you feel like you're supposed to.
Exactly. Get in shape is a conceptual ghost. It is vague. It doesn't move you emotionally. When it is raining outside and your alarm goes off at 6 a.m., the vague concept of getting in shape will not provide enough dopamine anticipation to get you out of bed.
So what's the alternative?
You need to connect your tiny steps to something specific, personal, and life-giving. The researchers call it a visceral value. It is something you can feel in your bones.
So instead of get in shape, a visceral value might be, I want to have the stamina to run around in the backyard with my kids without getting winded, or I want to feel strong enough to go on that hiking trip with my friends next summer and actually enjoy the view.
Yes. What
Yeah.
excites you? What actually lights you up? When you connect your small daily actions to a clarified, compelling personal value, you aren't just pushing yourself forward with the exhausting force of discipline, you are being pulled forward by the gravity of your own desires. It shifts the motivation.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the actual execution,
Yeah.
keeping the promises tiny.
When you have a long history of self-sabotage, your brain literally does not believe your big promises anymore. You have cried wolf too many times.
The self-trust is gone.
You have to prove to your brain that you are reliable again. And you do that by making the promise so incredibly small that it is virtually impossible to fail. If you want to start a daily meditation practice to help with anxiety, do not promise yourself an hour a day. Promise yourself 1 single minute, just 60 seconds of closing your eyes.
And when you do that 1 minute, your brain gets that tiny dopamine hit. It registers the completion. It says, oh, look at that. We did what we said we would do. We are trustworthy.
Precisely. You are laying down a new neural pathway in the basal ganglia. You are proving to yourself that you can follow through. Consistency builds trust, and trust builds the capacity for larger challenges later. But you must start small, and you must focus entirely on the act of showing up, regardless of the outcome. You are voting for your new identity, one tiny 60-second ballot at a time.
As we draw this deep dive to a close, I want us to really slow down the pace. If you are listening to this, wherever you are right now, maybe you're driving home from work, maybe you're walking the dog, maybe you're just sitting quietly in your living room, I want you to take a deep breath and really hear what we are saying.
You carry so much weight. You carry the heavy, invisible weight of every unfinished project, every broken habit, every time you felt like you let yourself down.
And we want to offer you a way to put that weight down. The researcher David Chan offers a final, elegant framework for managing the heavy, negative emotions that lead to self-sabotage. He calls it the 3 R's: refrain, reflect, and resolve.
Refrain from acting impulsively on your shame. When you feel the urge to punish yourself, just pause. Reflect on the psychological need your behavior is trying to meet. Ask yourself what you are afraid of, with deep humility and honesty, and resolve to take one tiny, compassionate step forward.
We have the power to stop the spiral. Each thought, emotion, and behavior doesn't occur in isolation. They are links in a chain, leading inevitably into one another. But when we intentionally interject with a moment of self-compassion, we break the chain.
I want to speak directly to you right now. If there is only one single thing you take away from this entire deep dive, let it be this smite. You didn't fail. You were just trying to survive in a way that didn't work.
The psychological defenses you built over the years, the procrastination, the self-handicapping, the perfectionism, the giving up, they were all just your mind's desperate attempt to keep you safe from the pain of feeling unworthy.
They served a protective purpose once, but you don't need them anymore. You understand the machinery now. You have new tools.
You are not weak. You are not fundamentally broken. You are just exhausted from fighting a relentless war inside your own head. And you have permission to call a truce today. You can lay down your arms.
As we leave you today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over in the quiet moments. We spend so much of our lives obsessing over what we need to do to be better. We plan, we scheme, we set alarms, we punish ourselves for our lack of progress. But what if the most productive, transformative action you can take for your future is simply choosing to forgive yourself for yesterday?
Thank you for trusting us with your time today.
Yeah.
Be gentle with yourself. Start small, and we will be right here waiting for you next time on The Deep Dive.